Good evening, parents, carers and community members. I hope you are all well this evening. Thank you for joining us. Our webinar this evening will focus on AI and teaching and learning at Forest, specifically the senior school. And I'm delighted to welcome Miss Mackie, who is our Deputy Head of Section Middle School, focusing on academics, to lead this webinar this evening so expertly. Before I hand over to Miss Mackie, I'd just like to remind you that next week we have a webinar on Thursday, the 5th of February, which is avoidant behaviours in young people. And that is going to be led by our amazing Place to Be team, specifically Amanda Gale, our Place to Be project manager. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Miss Rona Mackie. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And welcome parents and carers to this evening's webinar on AI and teaching and learning at Forest. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rona Mackie and I'm the Deputy Head of Middle School Academic and the Head of Religious Studies and Philosophy. So the topic of AI obviously permeates many aspects of the school and of education, but in this session I will be focusing on teaching and learning specifically. I will briefly discuss what the proliferation of AI means for schools in terms of teaching and learning and how Forest is navigating this. I will outline the guidance given to pupils about how to use AI effectively and examples of what this might look like in the classroom. Then, conversely, what constitutes misuse of the technology and how it could be detrimental to pupils' learning if used inappropriately. As you all know, AI has been around for many years, but when ChatGPT was released as a readily accessible resource in 2022, it quickly went viral, and researchers and organisations have been trying to keep up with the rapidly changing technology ever since, reflecting on how it can be harnessed, but also how any associated harm can be prevented. Some organisations and schools responded by banning generative AI completely, but at Forest, we have aimed to take a more nuanced and balanced approach, focusing on how we can utilise the exciting opportunities presented by AI to support pupils' learning, whilst also being aware of the potential drawbacks and dangers. What this looks like in practice is then something that we are keeping under constant review as the technology develops apace. Balance is the key word here. AI has divided opinion in terms of how people view it, and indeed, many people's opinions will regularly change as more research is released and as the technology develops in terms of what it can do. In the media, we see headlines about AI making us stupid, about the impact on the creative industries, and how some forms of AI are causing harm to people, with other people hailing the opportunities that AI provides for improved systems, efficiency, healthcare, to name but a few. From my experience of talking to parents and carers, this same range of opinions exists within the Forest community. There are some parents and carers who are concerned about what the impact of AI will be, whereas there are others who would like to see AI being embraced and integrated as much as possible. For us, we therefore need to consider the purpose of education and what is in the best interest of pupils, which is always a guiding principle in any decision making made at Forest. As you all know, a core aspect of our provision involves preparing pupils for life beyond the white gates, a life which now involves AI. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that when pupils come to complete coursework, this must be their own ideas. And when completing exams, they will not have access to AI, so they mustn't become dependent on it. We need to avoid cognitive offloading and ensure that any use of AI serves to deepen knowledge. We must also bear in mind that people's brains are still developing and their prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed, which means young people are more impulsive and less likely to stop, pause, and reflect on what they're seeing. So whereas adults can quite easily integrate AI into their work life in a way that's appropriate and accurate, young people will find that critical thinking more difficult. Some key concepts which are helpful here include AI literacy and digital wisdom. Mills et al. Have described AI literacy as having the knowledge and skills that enable people to critically understand, evaluate, and use AI systems and tools to safely and effectively participate in an increasingly digital world. Digital wisdom then places the emphasis on wise decision making. Competency using AI isn't enough. Pupils also need wisdom, not just how to use the tools, but when to use them and what are the benefits and limits. To do this, pupils require critical thinking skills, skills which have long been taught at Forest and which now need to be applied to this new technology. Dr. Daniel Ershov notes that this concern about the impact of new technology isn't a new one. Plato was concerned that the invention of writing made humans more forgetful by offloading memory. The introduction of personal calculators in classrooms in the 1980s created concerns about the development of students' math skills. The widespread use of Wikipedia was seen as the end of students' research skills. However, history has shown that when used correctly, these tools complement and facilitate the development of cognitive skills rather than slow them down. Writing, rather than making us forget, helps to preserve and process information that we will struggle to remember. Similarly, multiplying 4-digit numbers together is a trivial but time-consuming and frustrating task. If pupils are required to constantly perform simple multiplication tasks, this may prevent them from applying deeper thinking to maths problems. Research has shown that pupils using calculators enhances creativity in problem solving and increase understanding. Put simply, these technologies automated unimportant, boring, and time-consuming tasks, allowing humans to focus on more important problems and questions that are in some ways more cognitively challenging, in the sense of requiring more creativity and critical thinking. AI can also be very powerful in offering personalised learning. For example, online quizzes, which can identify areas of weakness and then set further questions targeting those particular areas. Similarly, another benefit of AI is that it's available 24/7. Pupils can ask for feedback on their work and get an immediate response. They just need to ensure that the feedback they receive is relevant to their context. GCSE and A-level rubrics, for example, can be very specific in terms of what they are looking for. The main problem lies in using AI to generate your thoughts and package them for you. This is a form of intellectual outsourcing, and it undermines everything education should accomplish. We're supposed to be developing minds that can grapple with complexity, tolerate ambiguity, and push through confusion to reach understanding. When pupils bypass that struggle, they miss the very experiences that build intellectual stamina and confidence. And the cost goes far beyond individual development. When everyone's using the same AI tools to generate similar outputs, we lose the diversity of thought that drives innovation. Original ideas sound wrong at first, but that's where breakthroughs come from. We need pupils who insist on doing their own thinking, despite the temptation of polished answers. We need them to value their own struggle with ideas, to trust that the mess and frustration of real thinking leads somewhere worthwhile. Cognitive offloading also causes problems because although you may have a collection of correct outputs, you don't have the integrated understanding of procedural process necessary for true expertise. And we know that the journey pupils go on is more important than the final destination. Anyone who has heard me speak before will know that I love an analogy, particularly if it involves running. And once again, I'd like to use running as an example. In this case, I've drawn upon one of Daisy Christodoulou's many articles on AI. This example focuses on the goal of running a marathon in particular. We know that you can't run a marathon on a first attempt. You need to build up the skills over time. You could strive to a finish line and skip the hard parts in between, just like you can use AI to give you a final output. But you haven't developed the skills needed to do it, and you can't say you've run a marathon. And the end goal of training for a marathon isn't just to get to the finish line. It's to develop yourself in ways that allow you to reach the end goal, to develop mental toughness, strength training, knowledge of effective fueling, how to avoid injuries, etc., which are built over time through deliberate practice. Similarly, the skills you need to be able to have in order to work with AI or to reach another work goal aren't going to be developed by using AI. In fact, they'll probably be stunted by excessive use of AI in training. That's not to say AI isn't used at all, but it shouldn't be an easy shortcut at the detriment of mastery. It should be used to make us even stronger. And there is joy in the journey. The ancient Greek marathon runners were a vital part of the functioning of great Greek city-states. Their aim was to get a message from A to B as quickly as possible. And in a world with no combustion engines or telegrams or internet, if you needed to send a message, you needed a day runner. Nowadays, that is obviously not the case. If you need to send a message to a friend 26 miles away, you'd probably send a text. If they needed a particular physical set of documents, you still wouldn't hire a day runner. You'd hire a taxi driver instead. And yet, running marathons is incredibly popular, and more people run marathons than ever before. None of them run it to courier a message. The vast majority run it for reasons of personal development. So to summarize, although AI may give the correct outputs, the person using AI hasn't gained the skills necessary for true mastery. As well as this, there are problems with AI in terms of where it is getting its information from, leading to bias being perpetuated, incorrect information being spread even wider. Then if AI doesn't have the answer, making up a response and hallucinating due to how AI is trained on only a certain amount of data. So if unsure, it will respond with the most statistically likely answer, which is often incorrect. It is therefore important that pupils are trained to apply the skills of critical thinking into AI, so that if they're using it, they are doing so with the necessary skills to interrogate it. It's also worth noting that due to the potential harms, there are age restrictions on the use of generative AI. In the UK, these are currently managed through a combination of company-specific terms of service, data protection laws like UK GDPR, and emerging safety standards under the Online Safety Act. While there is no single statutory AI age for all tools, the industry standard is moving towards 13 plus or 18 plus depending on the platform. For example, ChatGPT requires users to be 18 or older or 13 plus with parental consent. So, what are we doing at Forest to support pupils in navigating the world of AI, particularly in relation to their academic work? Last year, we shared our AI guidance documents with pupils, parents and carers, which outlines what generative AI is, the age restrictions associated with it, how to ensure academic integrity, and how to ensure any use of AI is done responsibly. However, we're conscious that just producing a guidance document and sending it out is not sufficient, and that the advice could be seen as quite general. So at the same time, academic departments shared specific examples of appropriate and inappropriate use of AI in their subjects, all of which were shared with middle school and sixth form pupils electronically. You can see an example on the screen now for modern foreign languages, which I'll just give you a moment to look over. And then here is an example from history. Use of AI was also discussed during academic lessons as part of our AI Focus Week. As RS is my specialism, the following slides are taken from some of my lessons. With my GCSE class, we started by talking about how AI can be used to define concepts that pupils may be unsure about, but how it is important to consider the prompts being used. In this example, I've asked AI to define karma, and the definition that it gives is pretty good. But then I ask it for the AQA RS GCSE definition, and it is much better as it references other Buddhist concepts studied, and we can see that it is taken from guidance documents provided by the exam board. Similarly, analogies are very helpful in arts and philosophy. So here I've asked Copilot to generate 3 analogies for nirvana. As a class, we then discussed whether the analogies were helpful or not, and which analogy was the best, encouraging pupils to utilise their critical thinking skills. Pupils are then encouraged to come up with their own analogies. Finally, in RS GCSE, pupils are asked to support their points with quotes, and AI can be a great way of finding new ones. However, they must be very careful about the legitimacy by double checking the source. Here's an example I used in my class. I asked Copilot to give me some Buddhist quotes on happiness. We then noted that references were given, so surely that means they're fine to use. However, when we clicked on the links, we were then taken to a website called The Power of Positivity, which doesn't look very academic, and there's no reference. So we went back to Copilot, and it tells us that the quote is often misattributed to the Buddha. Thus, pupils shouldn't use it. So those are just some examples from RS, but hopefully that gives you a little flavour of the focus week and the guidance which was given to pupils across individual subjects. Similar activities and discussions will then happen at appropriate points throughout the year. For example, just last week, I was setting a task for one of my classes in which they needed to research and evaluate the evidence for Jesus. When discussing if they could use AI to help them and what the benefits and drawbacks could be, pupils identified that AI may put its information from conspiracy theories online. So in this case, if they see theories that Jesus went to France with his partner Mary Magdalene and had children, they need to interrogate that. We also discussed how it is incredibly rare for generative AI to give a response, "I don't know." Instead, it will hallucinate and confidently state something false, such as inventing a biography, a historical event, or citations from scientific studies or news articles that don't exist. Then there's a well-known example of AI image generators creating images where a person has an extra finger. This led to interesting conversation about how AI generates its answers, and I was impressed by the insights pupils shared, although some were certainly surprised by the amount of hallucinations AI can have. As well as during lessons, conversations around AI are also covered in tutor times as part of the personal development curriculum, during which we have covered areas such as the difference between academic malpractice and academic integrity, is AI making students stupid, and examples of how AI can be used to support learning. Here's a slide from one of the middle school tutor times, which shows a number of different ways in which AI can be used, and pupils were asked whether they thought they were good or bad uses of AI. I will just leave them on the slide and then show you the answers in a few seconds. So these are responses. The two on the right were deemed as good uses of AI and the other four to be problematic. And you can see that an important question to bear in mind is, what was the task set and is AI doing the task for me? But then to make this more domain specific, examples of appropriate and inappropriate use of AI in individual subjects is given. So again, here are some examples from history. I'll give you a few seconds just to read through them and see what you think, and then I will tell you what we have said. So these are responses. The first two were appropriate uses of AI, helping them to understand command words in a bit more detail or to check what they've written, that it is correct, accurate, etc. But then the next two, inappropriate, as they are taking the ideas and putting them across as if they are their own. Then the final one, not necessarily appropriate or inappropriate, but it's bad practice, and there are other ways in which they could find out that information that is maybe a better way. Then we've also covered the rules on the use of AI in coursework and non-examined assessments. On the screen now, you can see some slides from a Year 10 tutor time, which shows a number of case studies taken from the JCQ guidance given to schools, JCQ being the Joint Council Qualifications. Just to be clear, these examples are not from Forest, And we have a number of measures in place to try to prevent pupils from Forest from being disqualified from any of their subjects, which I will go through in a couple of minutes. But I'll just let you have a little read through this slide about GCSE history. So that was the case, and then this was the outcome. There were two different candidates, candidate A and B, and it shows the outcome for each of them, which I'll allow you to look through. So from these examples, you can see how high the stakes are. You have one candidate who said that they had done it accidentally, another candidate admitting having used it to try and improve their own work. But for both candidates, there were severe consequences, one being disqualified from qualification and one losing marks for that particular component of the qualification. Then a second example we gave to students was from the higher project qualification, which all year 10 students complete. Again, I'll just give you a moment to read through. So again, severe consequences for that particular candidate. So what's the Forest doing to prevent pupils from making mistakes and being disqualified? So firstly, information from JCQ is distributed to candidates sitting exams and coursework. Teachers are trained on spotting AI so that appropriate steps can be taken before work is submitted to exam boards. AI detection software is used, and if there are any doubts or suspicions, we will ask pupils to redo the affected work. On this point, it's worth noting that exam boards don't have to prove the use of AI. If they have good reason to suspect its use, then they can take action. Then in terms of sanctions, as the potential consequences of using AI are so severe, namely pupils could receive 0 for a piece of coursework, or even worse than this, any coursework for that exam board. We mirror the severity in our behaviour policy. Therefore, any case of academic malpractice are sanctioned with a leadership team detention. However, more importantly, pupils will have an educational conversation about their use of AI so that they can fully understand why their use of AI was inappropriate and how they could have approached their work differently and in a way that maintains academic integrity. So academic integrity is an idea that we often refer to, and on the slide now, you can see that we break it down into 5 different areas, those being honesty, fairness, trust, respect, and responsibility. Values which apply whilst pupils are at Forest, but also beyond. Then in terms of upcoming sessions, the next middle school tutor time on AI will be arming pupils with ways in which they can reflect on their use of AI and how it could impact well-being, based on a number of prompt questions. This will then empower pupils to be able to interrogate their use of AI and make good decisions in the future. I'll put a selection of the questions on the screen now, some of which you may also want to use as a starting point for any conversations that you have with your child, as we know that being curious is often an effective way into having meaningful conversations. The questions are: what challenges did you encounter while working with AI? What would you do differently next time? Did using AI help you understand the concept better or just finish the task faster? How did using AI affect your confidence in your own thinking and writing? At what point in the process did AI feel most helpful, and when did it feel unnecessary? How much of the final work still feels like your own work? How do you feel when you use AI for schoolwork? Motivated, relieved, anxious, or unsure? Have you ever felt dependent on AI tools, and how does that make you feel when you can't use them? Have you noticed any pressure to produce AI perfect work? And do you feel more focused or more distracted when AI is part of your learning process? However, as mentioned, we do also want to support pupils in using AI tools to support and deepen their learning. So to finish, I want to outline some examples of how AI tools are used in academic lessons and how themes related to AI are woven into the curriculum. In drama, AI is used to support pupils in developing and refining their creative ideas. Pupils upload their annotated costume and set designs into AI tools to generate realistic visual representations of their concepts. They can then make improvements to their designs by adjusting their prompts. This process helps pupils to better visualize how their designs would appear in performance, bridging the gap between initial sketches and a fully realized production. It supports creative decision-making, encourages refinement based on visual feedback, and improves pupils' understanding of how design elements work together on stage. Similarly, in design, pupils generate design ideas using AI image generators. They then evaluate these from a design perspective. And in history, teachers might show AI answers to A-level questions, which are limited, for example, in syllabus content, and which students then have to add to and improve. Finally, in terms of the curriculum, AI is of course covered in the computer science curriculum, but issues around AI are also woven into other subjects. And again, just to give you some examples from RS, in Year 8, as part of the religion and the media unit of work, there's discussion about how AI portrays religion and potential bias within that. In Year 9, on the topic of personhood, pupils explore whether an AI robot has personhood. Does it think? Does it have emotions? If you killed an AI robot, should that be considered murder? They then complete a mini research project on an issue surrounding the ethics of AI. I hope that this has helped to build a picture for you in terms of how Forest is incorporating AI into our educational provision. However, as discussed, our approach is iterative in nature and will continue to evolve. Indeed, our Director of Innovation and Transformation has already begun a substantial piece of work on our use of AI as a school. And as part of that, we very much welcome the involvement of parents and carers, as we appreciate the high level of expertise among our community and our shared goal of ensuring pupils leave Forest adequately equipped and ready to thrive in their future careers and endeavours. More to follow on this in due course. Finally, I just want to flag that on Tuesday, the 10th of March, there will be another Forest Focus webinar looking at AI, but through a different lens, entitled Algorithms, AI Companions and Social Media, Understanding the Hidden Influence on Young Minds, which is being presented by the founder of Kids and Clicks, a web resource that helps parents and young people thrive in a digital world. We hope to see you there. Thank you very much for listening. I hope that this was helpful and gave you a good insight into some of the things happening in Forest when it comes to AI and teaching and learning. Wishing you all a wonderful rest of your evening.